Hello, everybody. I'm Ed Krupat, and I've been working with the BEI for a while as a person who advises on research. And I've been asked to take, maybe 15 at the most 20 minutes today to see if I can't distill a lifetime of work and insights into just a few minutes. What I'd like to do today is to talk about how to launch a new medical education research project. And what I want to do is see if we can't distill all of this into 10 relatively straightforward steps that lead to successful products and successful educational research. In particular, what I'd like to do is bring to bear my many years of thinking about and designing research into these 10 steps that each have a suggestion, hopefully that's extremely useful to new people, novices, even people who are research phobic, and also with maybe some insights to people who are more experienced and to give you more insights. Because at each step, I think what we'll be doing is talking about something that you ought to do that will lead to a good outcome, but it will also hopefully point out missteps that you might take that you can avoid. And I say this not simply because my CV is the longest of anybody out there. In fact, it's certainly not, but because of years of teaching research methods, mentoring and coaching resident students and faculty, and also from many, many years as a reviewer, seeing what people do right and do wrong. So let's get started. First of all, start out by clearly defining what it is you want to ask. I know that one of the major problems people can run into is saying, well, this sounds interesting, and let's study something about it, but then not really developing a clear focus. It makes the designed research problematic. It makes the write-up of that research even more problematic. The other day, I was talking to a colleague about students who come into medicine having studied biology versus student majored in college versus students who come into medicine having studied majored in the humanities or the social sciences. And we got into an interesting debate as to what their experiences are, what happens to them, whether it makes a difference for the medical field. And what we realized is, instead of just offering our opinions, is that this was something that could have developed into a research project. So instead of saying what happens to these people, we started saying, let's ask ourselves a specific question. Do people who start in majoring in the social sciences versus the hard sciences go in different career directions? And that quickly focused us into a predictor and an outcome. And we were on our way toward developing, I think, a reasonable research project. The other thing is I implied as step 2, and that is I was saying I was dealing with my colleagues, but sometimes you get an idea on your own. Sometimes you come across a problem on your own. Sometimes you've developed an innovation, a curricular innovation, or a new teaching method on your own. And the idea is that I've always said that research is a team sport. It's amazing when you bounce your ideas off colleagues, mentors, all kinds of friends. The feedback that you get, we always think that our perspective is everybody's perspective. And what you do is you find out that the richness in designing a problem and defining a problem comes from working with others. The other thing, too, is those others may decide that they want to be co-participants, co-authors, and all of a sudden the work gets lighter. So there are all kinds of reasons, from intellectual to practical, where it makes sense to bounce your ideas and work with colleagues and mentors, and even, again, just friends. Then, once you've done that, what you ought to do is consult the literature. I will tell you, I have dealt with too many junior faculty and students who, when they come to me about writing up a paper, I say, well, what does the literature say about this? And they say, well, we've got our results now. And that's what I was about to go to. I was about to find out what others have said. And that's putting the horse and cart backward. Once you have an idea, go to the literature, work with a reference librarian, work on your own, work with colleagues to find out what is known. The best thing about research that I was taught is that it's a process that builds. So your research ought to benefit from the knowledge that others have generated. And also, by the way, what you will find is that once you consult the literature, you will realize that there are all kinds of insights about what they did and how they did and what they used and how they analyzed that will allow you to take shortcuts, to benefit, to build upon what they did. So don't wait. Consult the literature early rather than after. By the way, if in fact you're at a point in a project where you didn't consult the literature, you can benefit even after the fact, but better do it first. Then, okay, so I've got this idea, I know what others have done, and the question is, how am I going to study it? And once upon a time, the answer was, I'm going to do what's called a quantitative study. I'm going to do tests and get scores. I'm going to give a survey out and on a 4-point or 5-point scale, and I'm going to see the percentage of people who agree and disagree with various things that are items in the survey. And that was the nature of what medical research was. At this point, however, people have come to realize and appreciate the value of qualitative measures, of asking open-ended questions, of gaining insights and hearing what people do. And for a while, there was a debate between quantitative and qualitative. And what's arisen out of that is what people call mixed methods research. And that is to utilize the quantitative and qualitative in a way that's complementary. Not to say, by the way, that you can't do research, good research, great research, that's one or the other. But very often people have now recognized the value of bringing the two together, the quantitative to add a sense of precision and definition and statistical tests, qualitative to get insight and depth and understanding of what is happening. And when you put the two together, you often end up with great research. Either one, however, can generate research which is absolutely first rate. And then you say, okay, so I know in general I'm going to do this or that, but gee, am I going to need a control group? Do I need a comparison group if I want to introduce an intervention and find out how people did on that intervention? Don't they need a comparison of people who did things the usual way? Or maybe I should design it as a before-after approach, measure before and measure after. Can I do a randomized control trial? Probably not, but perhaps you can. So the idea is to understand really and to figure out what the specific nature of your design will be. Once you've done that, you say, okay, so now I'm going to use a survey or a questionnaire. And are there instruments that are already existing that I can use? We always talk about wanting to find measures that are reliable and valid, that have been tested by others and stood up to peer review. If you wanted to study empathy, for instance, there is something called the Jefferson Empathy Scale. It's probably been translated into 50 languages and used in hundreds of studies. Why would you develop a new empathy measure if you had the Jefferson? Or maybe you don't like the Jefferson. Well, there are a dozen others that have also stood the test of time. And then, by the way, if in fact you are studying something unique, something new, something that doesn't quite fit into anything, don't use a measure simply because you can say it's already been validated. If you have to, develop your own unique measure for your own unique problem and build in validity evidence to the study. So don't use something just because it's been tested, even though it doesn't measure what you're interested in. And then you've got this question, okay, I'm going to collect data. How am I going to analyze it? You may or may not have statistical skills. You're probably able to get access to a stat package pretty easily if you're associated with HMS or any of the hospitals or anywhere, that's an academic or medical center. But also, if you've got qualitative data, there are many different approaches to qualitative data. So one, you might do some reading and some looking up of stuff. But two, one of the nice things, for instance, at the Brigham is that you've got the BEI, and you've got a wealth of people who would be willing to advise you and assist you and put you toward the resources you need. Okay, so now you know how to analyze your data, and you're going to analyze your data according to answer the research questions. And then you want to ask yourself, what story do I want to tell? And very often people say, this is research, you're not telling stories. But in fact, if you read the best research papers, you find that they start by saying, this is the issue, this is what others know, and this is what we wanted to add or find out new. We did this, we collected data of this sort, we analyzed it in this way, and this is what we think it means. This is what it tells us. This is how it relates to past research. These are surprises or questions that arise for more research. It is storytelling. And I think anybody who tells you that good writing and good storytelling are inconsistent with good research, well, I'll just say as somebody I don't agree with. So then, you don't have to do this at the very beginning, but you have to ask yourself, where do I want to publish this? Or maybe I want to give a presentation at a national meeting, or whether I want to give a presentation at an educational meeting or meeting in my field, or do I think this is ready for a prime journal? There are all kinds of wonderful sources that will show you journals and the kinds of research that they publish for you to find something that exactly fits what you've done, what they're interested in, and the level of competitiveness to publish in a journal like this. Although, by the way, just like when kids think about what colleges they want to apply to, it's not such a bad idea to think of a reach journal, to apply to the best school, even if you don't think you're necessarily going to get into it. You'll often get feedback that will be invaluable for revising a manuscript and sending it to another journal. And then there is the writing. I think there's a sense among people who don't do it a lot that if you write a first draft and you get feedback that's negative or that calls for lots of revisions, that's bad. And I can tell you, I and my colleagues, years and years into doing this, constantly do this. We just sent off a paper and published a paper about an evaluation of the new Harvard medical curriculum, med school curriculum. And it went through, I would tell you, probably 8 drafts, and all of us being pretty experienced but critical of one another in a collegial way. So this can be done. It's something that, believe it or not, can actually be fun as well as a challenge, can be something that connects you to colleagues and gives you insight into the work you do. And guess what? It's doable in 10 easy steps. I wish you good researching. I wish you good success. And thank you for listening.